Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Parenting and Bonding with Children's Books show, where we believe that books are magic and have the power to transform homes. On this show, we talk to the authors behind the magic to find out their true intentions behind the books. And we are here today with Steph Katzovi.
You got it.
You guys in the group watching, you know I like to get the name straight before I come on, and I did not do that today. If you
It's
guys
fine.
knew everything that went into getting this interview scheduled between sick kids and just craziness, I'm so happy to be looking at Steph's face today.
Yes, it's great to be here, Quinn. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. So you guys are in for a treat because we're going to be talking about a chapter book today. In this book, we'll talk about it, but it just resonates with me because I remember my first year going away to summer camp. And we're here to talk about Steph's book today, Hurricamp,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
You
before
got
we
it.
get into it, Steph, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I mean, I could go so many different directions with that question, but I'll start with the simple. I'm a writer, mother of two school-age boys, and a
Mm.
wife to a husband who's a huge extrovert. So he's like the polar opposite of me. I'd say
Okay.
I'm naturally quiet and reserved, although I was voted class clown and best sense of humor in 8th and 12th grade. Um,
Really? Okay.
yes. I went to law school and spent the bulk of my career as a professional writer and as a speech writer.
Okay.
And I worked in corporate communications for many years. And now I'm super fortunate to be able to live my lifelong dream of being an author and also raising my two boys. So I'm very happy to be here and talking about my book and whatever else comes our way in this discussion.
Beautiful, beautiful. That was a wonderful introduction. You said your lifelong dream of being an author, and it really was lifelong because what grade did you declare that you?
I think it was third grade. I was 8 and a half. My
Mhm,
mom saved the essay that I wrote, and she sent it to me a few years ago when she was cleaning out her house. And
mhm.
it was one of those essays. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I said I wanted to be an author, and I want to write books. And I probably won't make a lot of money, but if I do, that'd be great. And maybe when I'll get older, I'll change my mind. And it was so funny because I was really very, very accurate at 8 and a half years old. That's exactly my philosophy now.
Yeah.
I didn't put in that like I'd like to help people with challenging experiences or situations where they need to find their inner courage to overcome an obstacle. But I was only 8 and a half, so I have to give myself a little slack for
Yes.
not being that articulate. Um, but yeah, it's funny how true I was back then to who I am now, and it's so funny to see. I put it up in my office so that
Mhm.
it's a reminder of the importance of staying true to yourself and having a passion and following your dreams. So I'm happy that I get to do that.
Yeah, so important. You just made me. I had like a flashback to when I was about the same age as you were, 8.
Hmm.
And we had to do a project on what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I said I wanted to be a journalist.
Ah, see,
Yeah, I wanted to be a journalist, and I don't know.
you're
Every
still
time,
young though, so maybe like podcasting existed then, but I know podcasts certainly didn't exist when I was a kid. But
yeah, right.
it's
What we
funny
just
how the
like
world
talk
changes.
radio. Yeah. So let me tell you, when I learned about your book, I was super excited. I was just coming from my son's school
Hmm.
today. They had like this annual turkey trot
Hmm.
at their school. So I was coming back, walking to my car, and I ran into one of the moms at school.
Hmm.
And she was telling me about how her son went to summer camp for the first time. And I was telling her that when I was growing up, I went to a Jewish
Oh, wow.
summer camp. And she said, "Oh, you." She said, "You fit in real well." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I kind of stuck out like a sore thumb." But it was. I just remember it was just a beautiful experience, and it got me. I was like, "This is so funny." Because this afternoon I'm going to be talking to Steph about her book
Hmm.
and just thinking about, because usually on this show we talk about like like picture books, things like that, like those in the moment types of things that we can talk to our children about and bond with
Right.
them, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we think about the situations that happen in your book, mainly taking place at a summer camp, it's like all the things that we're trying to do now with our children are preparing them for the moments
Right.
that you have in your book.
Right. And for me, the book's about a 10 and 3/4-year-old girl named Noodle Newman who goes away to sleepaway camp for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I wanted to do was explore sort of the challenges of a child becoming more independent and the complicated relationships of preteens and then Noodle's road to discovering her inner courage. But I
Mm-hmm.
needed to do it in a way where you wouldn't have too much parental oversight. Now, there, of course, are grown-ups at the camp, but
Yeah.
for me, I needed to figure out some device that would take her away from getting great advice that was, from a parent or a loved one, where you would, of course, say, yes, this is what you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, I put her at a sleepaway camp where she's getting terrible advice and, she's not making the greatest choices. And,
Mm-hmm.
I do it in a hopefully humorous way. But the point was just to give her some of these obstacles where she can discover her inner strength and the courage that she has within her and come out on top. And of course, just to make it even more exciting, I put all of this drama in the middle of a hurricane. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit of suspension of disbelief, but the overarching points are there. So yeah, it was a really interesting way to come about from the back end of how I wanted to send out messages about
Mm-hmm.
courage and inner strength.
Yeah. So where did the idea for the character come from?
Well, much like everything I think many writers write about, it comes from true life, except, my life wasn't as exciting as the one in the book. And for me, I went to sleepaway camp when I was 10, and it was only for 2 weeks. And
Mm-hmm.
I candidly did not enjoy the experience. I was
Mm.
shy and incredibly homesick, which are two very bad ingredients
Yeah.
for going away for the first time. And I unfortunately never went back to sleepaway camp from that experience. But I think that writing this book was a way for me to go back and rewrite the history that I wish I had.
Yeah.
If I had embraced the camp experience and opened up to these challenges that I was facing. And as a shy kid, I sort of didn't have the tools at the age where I said, Steph, you could do this, be your funny self, go back to what's worked for you when you were at home and going to school. And instead, I sort of shut down and I cried a little bit. And when I went home, I remember thinking, from now on, you've got to try harder to be more outgoing. And in that experience, although I didn't do it in the moment, I did it later. And that sort of stuck with me. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to write about for a book, this was the message that I needed to tell myself and hopefully share with the world to make a positive difference on someone with a similar experience or similar challenge.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm sure the parents that are going to be watching this, they, know and feel every kid is just going to have such a different experience when they go to summer camp or just anything going away from home for the first time. I know I'm a single mom, I co-parent. My
Mm-hmm.
son goes away, for the summer. And it's just the personalities, just the change in scenery, just the
Mm-hmm.
routine when waking up. All of that is so much to adjust to. And I
Yeah.
love that you put pen to paper on this because oftentimes we kind of, I think as parents or just as adults, ignore the different emotions and changes that go through. I'm sorry, I'm from New Jersey, talking with my
Yeah.
mom.
Oh, I'm from New York. I understand you completely.
But yeah, we ignore those feelings that they're going through and we just expect them to just, venture through and just be okay. But oftentimes there's so much going on in their heads.
Yeah, and I think, we don't always appreciate adjustments are really hard for kids.
Mhm.
I have two boys, one's 12 and one's 9, and I'm kind of a mom that likes structure and order and we do things in a certain way. And
Mhm.
then I sent, both of them to camp and there's structure and order, but not really. And it's I would imagine it's a really hard thing.
Mhm.
Looking back on my own experience, it was hard for me, but we don't really appreciate enough that we challenge our kids with, for sending your child to camp. It's a really well-intentioned challenge where you want
Yeah.
them to have this amazing summer and meet great people and establish new friendships and find out new passions that you might not have discovered at home. But it's
Mhm.
a hard thing to adjust to. And, it's not cut out for every kid. But that's sort of a broader lesson in life, is that you can't always plan out what you'll be challenged with so that you can plan ahead and decide, this is how I will tackle that problem. So
try as we might, right?
Yeah, I know. I wish I could just, give my kids all the tools they need to be amazing in everything they do and love life and have no challenges and never be upset. But, even as adults, we have the same challenges, on a larger scale in many cases. So it's very, very hard to really practice what you preach, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's, I'm glad that I have this book, because I can look back to it and say, hey, the main character could do it in her book. Why can't you do it in real life?
So I feel like we touched on this a few different ways, but a family grabs your book, they read it, or a child reads it. What is the main thing you think you want them to take away from reading your book?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways I would want a child to have is that they aren't alone in their feelings. And, it's tough to go through life at any age, but in particular, being a kid, it's really, really tough, because a lot of times you don't have the experience that, you get through age. And the nice thing about being a kid is that most kids are really resilient, and believing in yourself, knowing that you have inner courage. It's sort of like an amazing superpower to have. And there's this quote that Mahatma Gandhi once said, which is, in a gentle way, you can shake the world. And that's sort of what I've adopted as what I would love to do in life, through my work. And that's to inspire kids to be their best selves. So, that's how I'd like to gently shake the world. And hopefully I can do that through my books and my writing.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Age range is your now? Before I fully ask this question, I always tell parents to just ignore what the age range says.
Yeah.
I encourage them to, even their elementary age kids, to pick up chapter books and start reading with our kids. I feel like it's so important. But what age range, what child did you have in mind when you wrote this book?
I would say the ideal audience would probably be 8 to 12. However, I will say that my youngest child, was too young to read a chapter book. So I decided, when this book was almost finished, I was going to read it out loud at dinner. And I knew I'd written a good book when they would say, Mommy, don't stop reading. Now, it could have been that they didn't want to go and take a shower and get ready for bed, but I'd like to think that it was because the book really captured them and they didn't want to miss a moment of the action. But I think it is a really good book to read out loud if your child isn't ready for a full chapter book, or, swap out reading out loud to having them read to themselves or reading to you. Or, as you have older kids, they can read it to themselves and hopefully keep turning the pages till they get to the end.
Yeah. And I have parents that ask all the time, how do I connect with my kids through reading if they're doing independent reading and things like that? And I say, read the same book they are.
And my older son's at the age where he's reading some really interesting books. So he's reading a book, he's in 6th grade, and he's reading this book in school that he's like, Mommy, have you read this book? And I said, I think I have. He's like, it was written in 2017. I was like, oh, I don't think I have. He's like, this is a really good book. You should read it. And I said, okay, I'll wait till you're done. And then he said, but I have to annotate it for school. So I'm sorry I'm writing in it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, make sure you write neatly so I could still read it.
Yeah.
But it's, it's true. You could, read a middle grade fiction book if you're an adult too. If it's a really good book, I think, it's kind of like an all ages book.
You certainly can. And I'll get back to that in a second. I love the fact that you said you were reading to them at the dinner table. One of the main questions I get from parents is, I don't have time to read with my kids, or different things like that. And I'm like, you don't have to read, you don't have to wait till bedtime to read with them. You can find pockets in the day.
Right.
And I often encourage, during dinner time, I've had a couple parents say, they weren't listening when we sat down at the table. They're just too into their food.
I wish that were the case.
Yeah. But other kids really, really look forward to that, at the table type read. We have, I'll often read poetry to him when we're just sitting at the dinner table and I finish before him, or just something like that. So Keep that in mind as you guys are listening. I love that recommendation. I love
Yeah.
that. Did you start reading that book with your son yet? Or is he still reading?
I'm waiting for him to finish because I don't want to interrupt. He's, doing it for a school reading assignment, so I don't want to put any added pressure on. But I'm looking forward to it, and I read about it. It's supposedly a really good book. But yeah, reading at the dinner table is super important. At least for me, if they don't like what I make, I have to find a way to conceal. There's a lot more vegetables on the plate than there is, whatever the main course is that they may not like. So reading for me is a form of entertainment and distraction, particularly for my youngest son, who I think by the end of the day, he's just so tired, and eating is like, can't be bothered. But if there's some sort of parallel activity, like, I love to read out loud because I pretend like I'm an actress and I use all my different voices. And,
I love it.
it's almost like I'm enjoying reading out loud more than they're enjoying me, talking to them. But, I get a lot out of it. I hope they get a lot out of it too. But I think it's just a really fun way to connect with your kids, especially if you can make them laugh and do it while they're eating, and hopefully not, spitting out their food because you're so hysterically funny, which I will admit on my best days, I have done that with at least one, but probably two children, because laughter seems to be very contagious when you're in a situation where you're supposed to behave.
I love it. This 8th and 12th grade title of Class Clown is really
I worked really hard for it.
it's really coming out, and I love to laugh and tell silly jokes on this show. So this is like,
You're
touching
bringing
my
it out
soul.
of me. I feel really good talking to you. So I might be a
Good,
little more
same.
uptight otherwise.
Yeah, I try to make sure that both of us are comfortable, and it doesn't feel like one of those like static interviews. More like, the conversation. Kind of
Right.
how we want to make reading with our children feel. Often tell parents, you don't make it feel like homework. Often fight against in school
Yes.
when teachers give like, oh, read a book a day and write a report on it. I'm like, no.
I know reading's supposed to be fun. My mom was a retired reading teacher, so in our house, like, reading was the gateway to everything. Like, as I got older, she's like, if you want to learn how to cook, you have to be a really good reader, because a recipe, it's all about reading and following directions. And nowadays in math's all about reading too. And I often use that as my crutch, to inspire my kids to read as many books as they possibly can. But it is super duper important for so many things and for so many reasons. And really appreciating good stories also can transport you to different places that you never thought you could, visualize yourself in, and empathize with characters that you may not readily identify with. I mean, I can't extol the virtues of reading more than, probably the best teachers on the planet. And of course, I would put my mom in one of those categories as well.
I love that you grew up with a reading with a reading teacher. I love it.
This was pre-internet, so we didn't have a lot of other options if we were bored.
Yeah, I think that is a wonderful thing. And I feel like I'm losing the thought as the words are coming out of my mouth. But what I wanted to say was, when parents ask, like, how do I raise a reader? Like, how do I raise a child that loves to read? And something that you said made me think of this, because I tell them, you might not raise a kid that is going to pick up a book every day. But what you're doing is you're giving them the foundation to appreciate words and to appreciate story. And that will translate into so many different areas of their life. Because if they run from a book, they're going to run from so many other things that feel hard because they don't have that foundation. And oftentimes in school, they're being, kind of force-fed stuff. And so it never has a chance to turn into something enjoyable. And there are the levels to, how much they enjoy something.
Right.
But as long as we're giving them that foundation at home to be able to look at a book and have them like reminisce about like reading with mommy or reading with daddy and things like that, oh gosh, it could just be so powerful in their lives.
Yeah, and I'll admit my younger son does not love reading as much as my older son. And, I'll blame, YouTube for some of that. But I think,
So many parents will, but yes.
But one of the things I discovered was I was trying to get him into reading, and I was getting all these different books. I got him graphic novels, thinking, oh, maybe that would be something that sparks his interest. I got like a Sports Illustrated Juniors magazine subscription, and I think I'm the only one that's reading that in our house. But the one thing that he likes is sports. So I said, all right, so maybe don't read a book, but what's your favorite football team? And his happens to be the Buffalo Bills. So I said, okay, look up what the different statistics are about the different positions and your favorite players, learn about where they're from. And so through that, he's now quite knowledgeable about the Buffalo Bills. I'm not sure where that will help him in his educational program right now, but
research.
He's really into finding out about the players, learning their backstories. And so it was sort of a secret way for me to get him to read, but not really read. So while he may not win the summer reading competition at the local library, he will be a great statistician, perhaps. You know, who knows what this will open a door to.
Yeah, that solid foundation. Let me tell you, I recently had an author on, and we spoke about, because something that comes up in the group is parents are like, my kid is going to age out of reading reading aloud. Like, they're not going to want me to read to them anymore. And she said she had older kids, older than your kids, and she was saying that she shares articles with them, like based on their interests, and they talk about the articles like later in the day. And I'm like, we can't take that, for granted. Like, it might not be like a book,
That's
but
right.
You're reading together, you're, breaking down what the story meant, helping them. One of the biggest things, I was just watching a video on this yesterday, was the importance of making sure our kids know the difference between fact and opinion. Because there's so much, I don't want to use the cliche word, fake news.
Right. I think that is the best way to describe it.
Yeah. There's so much out there that we really have to make sure they understand the different, like, how to figure out what's right and what's wrong, what's true and what's not. And there are so many ways to do that other than, just regular books if your kids don't seem to be into that. But I am a firm believer that if you start young reading with your kids, it's going to show up somewhere later in life.
Yes.
It's going to show up somewhere. It might not be the way we envision it, but it will.
Right.
But it will.
I think every interaction that you can have with your kids is an opportunity to influence them and inspire them. And, what better way to do that if it's not with your words than with somebody else's words that you want to help personify or bring to life. And I totally agree. And I'm sure there's lots of studies. I haven't read them all, but there's plenty of studies out there that say reading with your kids has immeasurable benefits, not only for adolescents, but as they get older. And, for me, I am a person that read totally different books than what my kids are reading now, although I brought some of them from my childhood to their childhood. And so Judy Blume was a huge influence on me when I was a kid. And I think she's a writer whose style I try to emulate. And now one of my children's reading a book that she wrote for his class. I think it's Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. And he's like, Mommy, we already read this one. And I said, yeah, so now you have like a head start on what you're reading in class.
Yeah.
So, it just goes to show you that what's old is new, and a great story is still a great story at any age and any era.
Wasn't there I feel like there was a masterclass, the Judy Blume masterclass or something like that.
Yeah, I think I read about it online. I know I read it and I was like, oh, I should do more of that when I write. Or, she's just a great author. For me, what I love the most about Judy Blume and what I try to do in my writing is just to write in a really relatable, funny way, because nobody's perfect. And for me, the characters that I write, I want them to be imperfect on purpose so that you identify with them, but you say, oh, I would never do that. And that's a bad choice. Like, it's almost like you can create a really good contrast of what the right thing to do is. And then in a couple of cases in my book, the character takes a slightly wrong turn or a detour. And Judy Blume was great at writing like that, where you're just like, ooh, that's not, no. And then like eventually everything works out just fine. And I love that's what I love about writing when everything just comes together in the end. And it was a really bumpy road and, a lot of twists and turns, but you were there for the ride all along the way. And I hope that's what I get to do, as I continue to write more books, fingers crossed.
Yeah, we'd love to see it. So I feel like I don't feel like we went off on a tangent, but we talked about so many wonderful, like different things. So I just want to bring it back to your book. One thing I say when authors come on, if you had to give like a elevator pitch, what is the book about? What can parents expect? What would you say?
Well, I actually have one prepared. So
Okay.
I've touched a little bit on it earlier, but
Yeah.
Hurricamp follows 10 and 3/4-year-old Noodle Newman's topsy-turvy experiences her first time away at camp. The story comically explores the challenges of Noodle becoming more independent, the complicated relationships of preteens, and Noodle's road to discovering her inner courage. And since all great stories have plenty of drama, this one happens right in the middle of a hurricane.
So much involved. Let me tell you. So oftentimes, I think we can get caught up in like the location, plot of the book. I think one of the major things to take away as parents is his book is really good for encouraging independence and autonomy,
Yes.
and also just helping our children navigate change when we're not around them. And when
Right.
we can't just intervene at a moment's notice
Mm-hmm.
and help to pivot them. So if you're considering this book, and I hope that you are,
I do too.
just think about all the different moments that our children will have when they're outside of the home or in the home and they have to deal with change. And I think that this is a great conversation starter to learn about some of the things, some of the change that your child has had to deal with already, maybe something they're having difficulty navigating now, and things they'll have to manage in the future. So, in choosing this book for the show, I was thinking about all the times that just the great change that we saw, like the emotions in our kids, even dealing with something like quarantine and having to switch from in-person school to at home and all the anxiety that was around that.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I was able to sit next to him
Mm-hmm.
and see this anxiety and help him manage it. But when he goes away to camp, I can't sit right next to him and say, baby, it'll be okay. Do you want to take a break? Do you want to do this? They'll have to deal with those things on our own. So we just want to start those conversations early.
Right. It's almost like you need to give your kids the tools in a less stressful environment so that when there is something that might trigger a stressful situation, they'll be like, you know what, I think I got this, or, this is something that I talked about or something that I'm familiar with, or, it may be something completely new and it's a totally different experience than something they're used to, but they hopefully will say, you know what, I think I can handle this. I've managed through however many years a child might be. And, that's the ideal. In reality, life's kind of messy, and just doing what you can be. I always go back to, just trying to be a really good parent to my kids. And I have my good days and my great days and my not so good days, but hopefully in the long run, it comes out to be something that's a net positive. But, I think that's all we can do as parents is try and set our kids up for success and to be, adaptable and resilient. But it's not always going to be pretty. That's, I guess, from my book, that's what I learned, because I think I spent a lot of time when I was writing it, working through my own feelings and my own emotions. I recall an earlier draft, I rewrote the book a lot. I think I learned the value of a good editor from writing this book. But in earlier drafts, it was kind of like 30 pages of, what is she feeling and what is she going through as she's packing her things for camp. And in the end, that got totally eliminated from the book because it was more like I was getting into the character myself, and I, stripped away all of that background and just jumped right into the action, because I don't think any child would have the appetite for, character development like a foreign film. You might get that, but, by the time I got to the finished draft, I think I worked through a lot of my issues and I got the book to a really good place. And I think I got to a better place as a result of it too.
Yeah. And lessons learned for the next book.
That's right. I've already started the draft of my second book, and I have to say it was so much easier to write because I think, first of all, I knew a lot of there. It's a sequel, so I knew a lot of the characters already, so I didn't have to spend as much time. Only like 15 pages for the second draft. So I'm going to get rid of those too. But it's the first book that I wrote. I think it was a lot of trial and error, more error than trial.
Mm-hmm.
But the second book I'm hoping will be even better than the first, and same adolescent themes that I think, it's great that my kids are at the age of my audience because I can just listen to their stories from school and scribbling as soon as they tell me a story. I'm like, oh, that's going right in my next book.
Mm-hmm. But even that, and I'll try to stay on this for just a moment, but even the fact that your kids come home and tell you stories from their day, I think some of us take them for granted because not all kids are doing that. And I
No.
think, reading with them and opening up that doorway to communication is so important because I think that is what it leads to, them feeling comfortable enough to share with us what is going on through their day. I want to make sure you guys know where to find more about Steph and where to find her book. So I'm going to put her website on the screen for those watching. For anybody that is just on audio, it'll be in the show notes, but you can find her at StephKatzovi.com. That's Steph, Katzovi. And you're active on Instagram.
I am. Same name, Steph Katzovi, and also Facebook, Steph Katzovi Lit, LIT, like literary. Or you could think of it as I'm on fire, but not really.
I was waiting for you to say it, Steph.
I should have come up with a better joke.
We've had a lot of jokes like launch and fail on this show. So and that's because I don't shy away from telling a bad joke. Because if anybody's still going to get a laugh at it, it's going to be me. So
well, thank you for being so great because I threw out a lot of really bad ones today.
Let me tell you, well, I missed them. So gave me a good laugh during this whole time. So I want to make sure you guys visit Steph's website and you check out her book, Hurricamp. And why didn't I write it on the screen so that you guys can see the title? I'm trying to hold
up a copy too.
Oh yeah, do you have a copy of the book with you? There we go. Thank you. And you can see them in the middle of the storm there.
That's right. It's a very nice classic look from like 80s or some bygone era. Timeless though.
When I came upon your book and I saw the cover, I was in the midst of watching Stranger Things.
Oh, that's a very popular show in my household.
I was in the midst of watching Stranger Things, and your book just gave me like all the feels, like thinking about like those times back in the day. So I was like, okay, this is great, so timely. Okay, so is there anything else that you want to make sure families know about your book?
I think we covered a lot through our conversation, but again, I'll just go back to the importance of giving your children the messages that most parents, I'm sure, already do, that they're resilient, they have inner courage, they have the strength to overcome obstacles, whether you're there or not, and just being positive and finding the positives in the experiences that you have in your life. It's, I think, what makes for a better experience in adolescence and even in adulthood. But I hope we all can shake the world in a gentle way, however it's best for us. And hopefully I'll be doing it through more books that people will enjoy. Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Steph, for being here with us today.
Thank you. This was so much fun. I really, really enjoyed it.
Same. So guys, make sure you go to Steph's website. I'm going to put it up here on the screen. One more again, check the show notes wherever you're watching this. And Steph, thank you.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Have a great day, everybody.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.